What's up, Gould Miners? In today's episode, we welcome Securities Attorney Mauricio Rauld. Mauricio has positioned himself as one of the foremost experts online in securities law. Now, you might be asking yourself, why on earth do we have a securities attorney on a real estate investing podcast? Well, in today's episode, Mauricio breaks down his role both in real estate syndications and real estate funds. Lots of gold nuggets for both general partners and limited partners who are either invested in deals currently or who will be investing in deals in the future. So without further ado, everyone, welcome to the show, Mauricio Rauld. Mauricio, welcome to the Gould Mine.
Hey, thanks for having me, man. Really excited about the show today.
Well, so am I. And you know, for someone who's tuning in right now and they're like, what does an attorney have to do with real estate investing? It seems very out of left field. So why should people pay attention to this episode?
Yeah, that's a great question. I help real estate investors, who are raising capital. I help them stay out of jail basically, because all these guys are selling securities. And that's a question I get all the time. It's like, wait a minute, Mauricio, why are these people, why is the Securities and Exchange Commission in my business? I'm just buying a piece of property, a piece of real estate. Why do I need to talk to somebody like Mauricio? And the answer to that question is because the SEC, or the Securities and Exchange Commission, they define a security super broadly. So it doesn't really matter if you're investing in real estate, if you're investing in crypto, if you're investing in businesses, if you're investing whatever. Anytime you take money from passive investors where the returns are generated by your efforts, meaning you're doing all the work and you're basically just taking money from passive investors, that is going to be a security, which means you fall into the landmines or the nightmare of securities laws, which is why you need somebody like me to make sure that you're raising capital in full compliance with not only federal securities laws, but also your states you've got to think about too.
So for the most part, you deal with the sponsors or the general partners of the syndication, not necessarily too much with the limited partners, correct?
100%. Yeah. So my clients are all out there raising capital. They're all raising capital for real estate deals. And the only time I really interact with the sort of the limited partner side is either they've got a question about the docs, right? And so the sponsor asked me to come online and help them answer some of the legal questions they may have about the disclosure documents. Or I'm a former asset protection attorney. So when I put my asset protection hat on, I have a lot of limited partners who are obviously also investing in real estate directly. And so they've got all kinds of questions about entity formations and just how to structure their entities to maximize the protection, because they spent all this time and energy accumulating real estate. They want to make sure they don't lose it if they get into some car accident or if they get some frivolous lawsuit against them.
So that's actually a really great segue, because I do want to spend a little bit of time here, because there's a wide variety of people who listen to this show, people who are passive investors, people that are syndicators. So when it comes to asset protection, I actually watched a video of yours. It was the 6 layers, I believe, right, of asset protection.
Yeah.
And so
thank you. Yeah.
Can you, and it was a really awesome video. Can you break down, maybe give a Spark Notes version of what that is? And maybe we could link that video down below, because it's a good one.
No, that's a great question, because, one of my pet peeves is, especially in the real estate world, right? People are like, oh, I don't need to set up an LLC. I've got insurance, right? Or, oh, I don't need insurance because I've got an LLC, or I've got privacy, or and they come up with all these things. And what I think people need to understand is that, first of all, there's no strategy that is foolproof, right? No matter what, you can give me any strategy from an asset protection standpoint you want, I will poke a hole in it. Like, there's always an issue. And so I think of asset protection, I think the video was doing the analogy of like layers of clothing. Like, you say, well, do I need a coat or do I need a sweater? Or it's like, well, it depends on how the day is, right? If if it's a beautiful day, today's a beautiful day in Southern California, I might be able to get away with wearing a t-shirt, right? But later on tonight, I might get too cold, so I may have to put some kind of a sweater on. And then as it gets colder and colder, if I live in, Minnesota or something, I might have to put a jacket on, right? And if it's like where my wife lives in Chicago in the blizzard of a winter, then I'm putting on a winter coat, right? And so each layer gives you additional protection, especially when some other layer doesn't. And so I did this video where I talked about the 6 layers. And again, it wasn't meant for this layer's better than another. It was mostly to sort of say, hey, here are the benefits of each layers, but here are the holes in them, which is why a lot of these strategies that asset protection attorneys put together is really a combination of these layers, right? So real quick, first layer I talked about was just kind of the free layer. There's a bunch of stuff that happens automatically, or no, I shouldn't say automatically, that is free. So for example, your home equity, so there's something called a homestead exemption. So most states will protect some level of the equity in your home. It's not a lot. Like sometimes it's $5,000 or $10,000 or $20,000, which is better than nothing. But, with real estate prices these days, that's not a lot. Some of them like Florida is unlimited. So this is why if you know anything about O.J. Simpson or those guys, like they may owe hundreds of millions of dollars, but they have a house in Florida that's completely protected. 401k plans are generally protected. Some portion of your wages are protected, but you sometimes have to make some affirmative steps. You might have to file something to get the protection. So I wanted to outline that first. That's kind of your free layer. Then the next layer is insurance, right? I always say that insurance is always your first layer of defense. Everybody should have insurance, but I think a lot of people misplace their trust on insurance. They think, I got an insurance policy, I'm covered. Well, not so fast, because number one, a lot of people are woefully underinsured, right? So they've got $1 million policy and they think covered, and then suddenly, they own an apartment building and the balcony collapses, 6 people die. That $1 million is going to be worth nothing, right? Or maybe a car accident. It's like a lot of people. So that's one thing, underinsurance. And then, of course, the big one for me on insurance is just all the exclusion. That's probably my number one pet peeve with insurance, is that everybody's making their payments, right? Your premium payments every single month. And you think you're covered for something. And then when that something happens, you realize, oh crap, my insurance policy has a bunch of exclusions, things that you're not covered for that people have no clue about. And that's usually one of the reasons why the first thing an insurance company typically will do is send you a denial letter, because they're like, oh, it's covered by the exclusion. And I've had so many experiences where I've had to actually go hire an insurance attorney to enforce my insurance policy because the insurance company is trying to rely on one of these exclusions to kind of get out of it. So that's really my big pet peeve. So insurance is great. Everybody should have insurance, but don't think it's the end all be all that because I've got insurance, I'm covered. I don't need to worry about it. So that's your first line of defense. When that doesn't work because you're underinsured or there's an exclusion or it wasn't covered or they went bankrupt or whatever the issue is, you want to have a backstop, which is kind of layer number 3, I think, which was entity formation. So LLCs, limited partnerships, those are great structures, especially for real estate investors. Most of the time we're putting our real estate in limited liability companies, right? LLCs. Yep. They provide pretty good protection, especially if you're covered with an insurance policy, right? So you got insurance first. If they get past that, now you've got an entity formation, which is great. But that isn't perfect either, right? There are some, especially here in California, there's a lot of judges that are piercing the corporate veil. So even though you technically don't own the house, and so somebody slips and falls in the house, really the owner should be responsible, which is the LLC. But somehow the judges are allowing them to sort of penetrate that and get to the owner, the ultimate owner, which is not great. And then on the flip side, there's something called the charging order protection, which is the cornerstone of LLCs. But some states recognize them, some states don't. Again, California is notorious for not applying, the state where the formation happened. And so they may apply California law, and California has terrible asset protection laws. So again, it just isn't super clean. Privacy is another layer that I like. Now, privacy in and of itself really doesn't do anything other than makes it really difficult for plaintiffs' lawyers to come after you because they don't know, A, if you have anything, and B, they may even not know who you are. So like somebody may slip and fall in your apartment building or in your home. They look at the corporate record, the public records, and they see an entity that owns it. They don't know who the owner of that is. So privacy is a great layer that everybody, again, privacy in conjunction with insurance, in conjunction with LLCs would be a great little combination. Then as you get more and more, you're doing better and better for yourself, the size of your estate grows, then you start looking at things like asset protection trusts. That's like kind of next level stuff. And to be honest with you, if everybody could get an asset protection trust, they should. The problem is they're expensive and they're expensive to maintain, and they usually don't make sense unless you have some level of wealth, right? If you've got a portfolio and your whole net worth is $500,000 or $1 million, spending $30,000 on an asset protection trust and $5,000 a year in maintenance, probably doesn't make any sense. Right. But certainly if you're now, doing really well, or a high earning individual or a doctor or somebody who's really high risk, asset protection trusts start to make sense, which by the way is different from a living trust. This is a big misconception. A living trust has no asset protection value whatsoever. That is merely a tool to avoid probate, which is a whole different discussion. But an asset protection trust is an irrevocable trust that gives you that asset protection component. And then the ultimate one, I think, that really our more advanced clients will do is some kind of what we call an equity stripping strategy, which allows you to basically put liens on your properties or maybe rent out properties. And so we're able to strip away the equity from the home. We can put a line of credit on it, almost like a bank. The bank gives you a loan and puts a second lien on your property, and that basically removes that equity from the property. You could do that with your own lending company. So The bottom line is, though, it's just, it really drives me crazy, especially on social media. There's so much misinformation, but where somebody says, oh, I don't need insurance because I got an LLC. No. Hey, I don't need an LLC because I have insurance. No. It's like, oh, I've got privacy. I'm covered. And like all these things. And like I mentioned, every single one of them has a hole that I can poke through. And so the idea is you either layer them, or the other analogy people use is sort of that layers of onion. Like the more layers you can put around your property or your assets or yourself, the better you are, because I've got to peel it out and it's just harder and harder to get to you. So that's why it's really a strategy more than anything. It's not necessarily just, hey, let me just go get an LLC. Where do you set up the LLC? Who should own it? Who should manage it? Should you act as your own registrar? Like all these questions come up when setting up these strategies. Sorry, I know that was a lot, but I wanted to get it all in there because it was a good video if you guys want to link it.
Yeah, 100%. And we will link that down below in the description. And, we could spend hours on just that, but I think for the purposes of this, just wrapping, bring that to a wrap, and one of the things that stood out to me there with asset protection is, when you think about like from a real estate investing standpoint, I think, a lot of real estate investors, they go on YouTube and they like find the whatever gurus like advice on how to conduct their investing business, but or their investing strategy. But from your perspective, Mauricio, because you've been involved in a lot of, you've seen it all now at this point, right? From the investing standpoint, what are the strategies that you've seen from a real estate investing standpoint? What are the strategies that you've seen work the best for passive investors, people that don't want to be like actively involved in their investing? Like what are some of the best kept secrets, if you will, or the best strategies that you've seen? In general or specific to asset protection? No, in general. I'm talking investing strategies, not asset protection.
Yeah, look, if you're a passive investor, which by the way I am as well, this is just a great vehicle to put your money to work. That's like kind of the ultimate leverage, right? That I'm able to give somebody that I trust, a sponsor. I can give them a portion of my net worth, and they're going to grow it, and I don't have to do anything. I literally, I do work up front, but then it's just mailbox money. I think it's one of the greatest things. But I think that the ones that I know that are most successful, and I like to think that I'm one of them, they put in the work obviously on the front end, right? So on the front end of an investment, that's really where you put all your work. And the thing you want to do is ask the right questions to sponsors, right? You want to be asking the right questions prior to selecting a sponsor, selecting an investment, all that stuff. And hands down, the most important thing you need to do as a limited partner is find out and do your due diligence on a particular sponsor. Everybody tends to focus on the property first. Oh, look at the property. It looks great. The numbers are great. The market's great, whatever. But at the end of the day, you've got to go back and say, hey, what is the experience level of this person or this team of people that are going to put this together? Because remember, you're going to give them your money, and they're going to take that money, go buy something, add value to that, and then bring you rents and increase the value and sell it and profits and all that stuff. They've got to be able to pull that off, right? And so one of the things you spend as a passive investor, I spent all my time on the front end, is vetting all the different sponsors so I get comfortable. Do they have the proper experience? Have they done this before? What's their experience in this particular marketplace? What's their particular experience in this particular asset class? Because sometimes people are like, hey, I'm the apartment king. I've got a lot of apartments, but this particular deal happens to be a mobile home park. Great. What's your level of experience there? Or at least is there somebody on your team that does mobile home parks or self-storage or what have you? So I spend 90% of my time focusing on those types of questions so that I get comfortable with a particular sponsor. And the nice thing is you do it once, right? Because once you feel comfortable, you do your due diligence, you go down, you visit with them, you look at their team, you figure, what are their operations like? And once you've done that, then, and you do your first investment, well, the second time you don't have to do that again, right? You've already put in the work to do that. But that to me is by far the most important thing. Then you want to start moving into, and this is one of the things you're looking into, that is, what's their investment philosophy? Does it match with yours? Is there alignment there? If you're a cash flow investor, you probably don't want to associate with somebody who's more of a developer. Nothing wrong with developers. They're not going to give you cash flow for a little while. Then there might be more of a capital gains play, and vice versa. If I'm just looking to, for big capital gains, I don't care about cash flows. So just making sure the alignment is there. I might be a C, the sponsor might love C class or D class or Z class properties. And you're like, that makes you a little nervous. And I like to play in like the A class or B class. So just make sure there's an alignment with that. And then you want to look at the actual market that they're invested in, right? Because again, to me, real estate is there's really no such thing as a real estate market. It's all localized, right? Each state, each county, each city, and sometimes even which side of the street. So just getting crystal clear on, once you figured out what the right sponsor is and figure out then, what markets do you like and are they aligned with the same markets? And then, what's their team look like? That's kind of the next step for me is like, is it just them? Is it a one man or one woman show? Or do they have a team of people? What are their level of experience? Who's actually going to be managing the day to day? All those kind of questions that I like to ask. And then the last thing I look at, which is important to look at, but that's the first thing I do. I'm not saying it's not important, but the last thing I look is now the property. Now, once I've vetted the sponsor, they're in the market that I like, obviously an asset class, presumably that you like. I mean, there's no point in being in self-storage if you don't like that asset class, but assuming you've got the asset class, you've got the sponsor, you've got the market, now you can look at the property and you can obviously ask the questions about, what does that look like and the pro forma. But again, the pro formas and the business plans, they're just a lot of times just pretty pitch decks, right? Anybody can put together a pretty presentation. The question is, can this team of sponsors pull that off? So I think, again, a lot of the great LPs that I know of do all that work ahead of time, because as you guys know, or as you know, once you write that check as a past investors, that's it. You don't have any say in the thing. That's the whole point. Like you're giving them your money. Then you're trusting the team to go deliver on whatever promises and projections and business plan that they put together on.
Yeah. So that reminds me of the saying, trust the jockey, not the it's trust the jockey, not the horse.
Yeah, bet on the jockey. You're betting on you're betting on the jockey, not the horse. Or one of those. I use it as well. I always butcher it.
Yeah.
Yeah, that comes into play a lot more, by the way, when people invest in funds, right? When you're investing in a fund, which has become super popular over the last 5 years, you don't have you're not looking at a property specifically. So I don't look at, I don't know what market it's, you kind of have an idea, I don't know exactly where it's located. I don't know what it looks like. I don't know how big it is, how small it is, what the game plan is, what the purchase price is. It's literally, I'm going to go buy hotels, or I'm going to go buy multifamily, or I'm going to go buy this. And so now it's even becomes more important to get your due diligence on the sponsor, because you literally are now betting on the jockey or the horse, right? Because there's nothing for you to look at other than the criteria. And really at that point, you're just trusting the sponsor. Because at least with a project specific, I can at least look at the asset, right? I can look at the property and say, hey, I can challenge your assumptions. You can be assuming that your rents are going to go up 2% every year, or you're going to be able to get this type of rents. And I can be like, I don't think so. I think rents, you'll be lucky if they stabilize and are zero for the next 5 years. And I can kind of mess around with your assumptions. And then I can say, I still like the deal. Like even if I'm a little bit more conservative, I still like the deal. When it's a fund, I'm completely relying on the sponsor, because I have an idea of what they're going to go buy, but I don't actually get to see it before they buy it.
I'm sure being in your position, you've seen a lot of crazy stuff in your time. What is like one of the most interesting stories that, say, LPs and GPs could collectively learn from?
Wow, what about a crazy story? Man, you're making me dig deep into the stuff. I've seen a few, and these are not far and few between, but I've seen a few Ponzi schemes out there, right? So that's something that you've got to be aware of. A lot of times when something doesn't seem quite right, or it seems too good to be true, it might be, right? And so that's probably I've got one in specific that I can't really get into too much detail, but there's definitely Ponzi schemes out there, right? And so you just got to be super. And again, this goes back to the due diligence and on the sponsor and the team and everything, making sure that you get some background on them. But there's been a few Ponzi schemes that I've seen, and also other people's. There seems to be more and more Ponzi schemes happening out there. So that's just something you want to be careful of, not only as an LP but also as a sponsor, because maybe that's another crazy thing that's going on. But now that sponsors are partnering with so many other sponsors, right? Which I think is actually crazy, but that's another reason to be careful, because now you partner with someone, you got to make sure that person is who they say they are. You want to be doing the due diligence on your co-sponsors as well, because if you don't, you might get stuck. And in a GP scenario, you've got unlimited exposure amongst everyone. So if you have, if you're getting together with 6 people and you don't know very well, and one of them turns out to be a bad apple, that's going to get imputed to you.
Yeah, that's a really good point, and actually something that I think. Probably. Just seeing how I mean, like you said, this has really been like over the last 5 years thing, because like, man, back in 2017, like no one was like, it was not as popular or as common. Why do you think that is? Do you think it's the social media effect? Like there's some popular people on social media that are doing it, and now they've made it like the cool thing to do. Is it like rising prices? Now it's harder for an individual to buy, a building, let's say. And so it's really more of a collective effort now. Like where do you think the core kind of reasoning behind the popularization of funds and syndications?
Well, I think it all started actually a while ago back. It's what is it now? It's a decade, just over a decade. So in 2013, they actually changed the laws, right? So in the old days, 10 years ago, you weren't able to advertise your deals, right? You had to like limit yours to your friends and family and people you knew really well. And then what happened in 2013 with the Jobs Act is they introduced this idea, which when you think about it, makes no sense, but it's there, which even though it was still considered a private offering, you were now allowed to go advertise, right? You can go on podcasts, you can go put ads. Certainly, back then social media just started taking off. But now you can start posting things on social media, going on podcasts is a relatively new thing as well. And so that all started to be legal back in September of 2013. And I think as social media has gotten bigger and bigger and bigger, then the popularity, and it becomes easier to go find people that you don't know, because in the old days you had to go get on a plane or go to a meetup or go to a seminar. And today you can get really good at becoming an influencer, meaning getting eyeballs on your content that then allows you to reach more people, easier for you to put together a webinar, easier for you to attract people. So I think that's part of it. Now I think it's getting to the point where it's getting a little ugly in the sense that, and this is something I've been thinking about quite a bit, and I haven't really talked about it too much on podcasts, so this might be a sort of a primer on this, but the whole idea behind raising capital has always been, you're really good at something, right? You're good at multifamily or hotels or self-storage, and you start doing this on your own, and you're so good that you'd like to go bigger, but you just don't have the capital. You're constrained with the capital, or maybe you don't want to tie up your capital. So you bring in other investors to help fund what you are really good at and expand. And therefore you can, instead of doing 50 units or 60 units, you can do 1,000 units, 10,000 units, because you're just that good.
Right.
But what's starting to happen now is people are just starting to raise money for the sake of raising money. Like they have necessarily no talent or nothing other than the ability, because they're either an influencer or because they're just good at teaching people how to raise money, but then, which is bringing in all these people into the syndication world that don't really know anything about. They wouldn't be able to go buy a piece of property on their own. Like if they're going to go invest in multifamily, they wouldn't know the first thing about going to buy a multifamily building on their own. And if you just handed them a check and said, hey, here's a check, go do it. So there was a stat I saw, it was actually a year ago, so it may have changed a little bit, but a year ago, there was a stat that said that 70% of syndicators, meaning people who are out there raising money, 70% of syndicators had 3 years of experience or less. And I think that's just part of that phenomenon post-COVID, or maybe during COVID, people got excited and started learning about it. And now, there's a lot of programs that are coming out, a lot of people teaching this. And so you're just getting a lot of people who really just want to go raise money. And again, my thought was always that the main thing is the main thing, which is, acquiring an asset, whether it's real estate or a business or whatever. And you just needed the help of other investors to help you go do that. Now people are just raising money to go raise money to give it to other people. They're basically a lot of times acting like brokers. It's like you should just go get your broker's license, because you might be really good at raising money, but you're not really doing anything other than raising money, right?
Right.
And that's one of the things that I've seen a lot lately, and I think that's going to end up in some bad news sooner rather than later.
That's a really good point, and something that I actually noticed just over the last 5 years. And actually, not to pick on him, right? But Cardone is a great marketer. Yeah. And that's actually how I found out about real estate. I didn't even know. I'd been in real estate for many years, but I did not know about real estate syndications until I researched him and what he was doing and all that good stuff. And then I really started to understand and go down that rabbit hole. But I had a real estate background, and I still didn't even know that this sort of investing vehicle existed. And that's actually still the case. A lot of my realtor friends, I would say the majority of my realtor friends, still don't know. Like, they're like, what are you doing? Like, what is this syndication? Right. What is this fund thing? Like, I don't understand it. So, I know a lot of people don't like Grant. I don't know Grant, but I like Grant enough. I mean, I think he started, he was well known for his sales
coaching or whatever, but he also was doing real estate and he was doing really well, actually. And then once this happened in 2013, he started raising capital from really high net worth individuals. I remember the minimums were 250 or 500 grand. I mean, this is really high net worth individuals under 506C. And then obviously as he's gotten bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger, he's able to now tap into the smaller and sort of the really the people who are just fans of Grant. He's been able to tap into some new rules that allow him to go, take $5,000, $3,000 from the little guys. But he did start, to Grant's credit, I don't know exactly how much he amassed, but he would be a good example of somebody who had amassed a certain level of success in real estate, but using his own money. So he was constrained. Now he's been able to raise money from more people. He's able to obviously acquire a lot more properties than he would have done if he was doing it on his own. And so I think that's a good example of using social media. You could argue whether it's the right way or the wrong way, but he had a skill and now he's got more capital so he can go do bigger deals. There's just so many people out there that don't know the first thing about multifamily or self-storage or hotels or mobile home parks, and they're just raising money for them because they're partnering with somebody else or just giving them the money. And it just becomes this industry of raising capital, not necessarily doing the thing.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And I think that there definitely are some dangers because for every instance like we just talked about with Cardone, it's like, yeah, there's like 10 copycats out there that are, great marketers and don't actually know the thing. And so it actually places an emphasis on who's got the best Instagram and not who's the best operator.
Like for example, I know you do a lot of hotels. Like I don't know anything about hotels, right? But I would like to think, I'm not going to do it because I don't like competing with my clients, but I'd like to think that I have the ability to go raise $1 million. I could probably go raise $1 million and then give it to you. Say, hey, Danny knows how to do this thing. Let me go raise $1 million from my people that know, like, and trust me. And then I know you, I trust you. So let me give the money to you. But I don't know anything about hotels. So I'm literally being a capital raiser in that sense, right? And there's ways that you can structure it where you can kind of get away with that a little bit more than I think the regulators would like to see. But that would be an example of how, I have the ability to go raise money and then I can give it to somebody else who can then go do the thing, or I can partner with somebody who can go do the thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And even in my instance too, I've not been shy about saying like, I'm not new. I am newer to hotels. I'm not new to real estate, but like, I also understand the importance of partnering with people that have way more experience than I do. Like the people that are in my group, like my partners have like double-digit hotels each, right? So like, and that's honestly like, that's part of the journey, right? Like, you're going to learn. I've learned the hard way before. If you try and do it all yourself, all on your own, you're going to fail miserably, and you're going to all this. I'd rather take less pie and learn from the experts. So yeah. Well, we're coming up close on time here, Mauricio. I want to be respectful of the time. Two last things for you here. First one, you touched on the accreditation standards and 506C, 506B, and if you don't know what that is, unfortunately, we're not going to cover that on this episode, but the accreditation standards are changing. How do you see that impacting the future of syndication and funds? Or I don't know. Are they changing? Are they not changing? Is it just hearsay?
They're definitely going to change. We don't know what the exact changes will be. It sounds like they're going to kick it down the can again till early next year. But the SEC it's on their agenda to revisit the definition of accredited investor. I think they're going to jack it up significantly, probably to about right now it's $1 million basically on net worth, excluding your primary residence. I think that number is going to go up, maybe 2 or 3 million. If you adjust. This came out in 1982. So $1 million in 1982, if you adjust for inflation today, is about 2.8 million. So to me, 3 million makes a lot of sense. But concurrently with that, so there's going to be a lot of people obviously who are no longer going to be accredited, right? Maybe more commensurate how it was back in 1982, whatever the small percentage in 1982 is going to be somewhat now in today's dollars. But there's going to be another avenue, right? There's already legislation going through Congress, and the SEC itself has passed a rule that they just haven't implemented, which will allow people to take a test, right, and become accredited through a certification program or taking a test, kind of like a securities license type test that you're going to have to study for and you have to learn all this stuff. But then you take this test, you pass, and that's how you're going to become an accredited investor, regardless of your net worth. So I think, and I've been talking about this for a while now, that there's going to be the the free pass version, which is like, hey, I've got a certain amount of net worth, which is going to be higher now. So it's not going to be $1 million, it might be 2, it might be 3, but that's the automatic way. And if I can't qualify through that higher number over here, I've got an alternate path, which is let me go take the test and be an accredited investor that way. But it's going to be a little bit painful. I don't know how many people, I think, if I'm accredited and I've been investing in stuff and now I'm suddenly not accredited, I'm probably going to go take a test so that I can become accredited. Otherwise, I won't have access to a lot of these deals that are limited to accrediteds only.
I suspect that whenever this passes and everything, I suspect that eventually a lot of the people that unlock accreditation, the accreditation standards will have already been licensed. They'll already have the license because that's how they kind of accumulate that wealth or that's one of the ways that they do that. So, in traditional Gould Mine fashion, Mauricio, a quick final Gould nugget for the audience.
Oh, Gould nugget for the audience. Let's see. I would, there's so many Gould nuggets. One of the things that I've started to do, it's been a while now, but I don't know if you're a morning person or not, Danny, but everybody that I know that does fairly well, they get up early. And I would encourage people, if you guys are not getting up, forget about this 5 a.m. stuff, but at least maybe the 5 a.m. I usually get up around 4, but you just get so much done between those early hours when everybody's, they're not emailing you, they're not calling you, you get that time to yourself. And I've really given myself permission. I've been expanding that morning time. Like it used to be an hour or 2 hours. Now I basically give myself 4 hours in the morning where nothing else can distract me. I'm working on my one thing or what's the most important thing to drive your business forward. But whether it's the morning or the evening, just set aside that block of time. I like to do in the morning because, like I said, nobody else is emailing me. I'm fresh. I've gotten a good night's sleep. But if you can take that time, get up early before everybody else does, and get that, even if it's just 90 minutes in the morning, you just multiply that by 5 days, by 365 days. After a while, you're going to have such a big advantage over somebody else that that leverage is going to take you to hopefully wherever you're trying to get to.
That's awesome. Well, I could not agree more, and I've definitely found that to be true in my business. So thanks for your time, Mauricio. This was
of course,
awesome.
Man. Always,
and hopefully we'll have you back on again at some point in the future.
No, I'd love to. I'd love to come back.